Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I just want to direct your attention to the risk disclaimer at the bottom of the screen. Trading futures is risky. It's not suitable for everyone. Anything you see on the stream is not only delayed, but does not constitute financial advice. Everything you see on here is educational only. The stream is delayed by usually 10 to 15 seconds. It's variable. So anything you see me doing has already happened in the past. So make your own decisions. Do not think that anything we talk about here is financial advice. So with all of that out of the way, we are sitting here at the New York Open. The NASDAQ sold off for most of the night before finding a bottom right at the top of yesterday's or this week's balance um, down here at 28,950. Um, the overnight, I was actually looking, though I don't trade Globex, I was looking for a potential bounce off of this 2930 area, which was the midpoint of the session from yesterday's RTH or yesterday's session, and did get a bounce in the overnight. It got up to this imbalance level before selling off and making another new low. Now we're just kind of chopping inside of value. Yesterday was a pretty productive session for the buyers. Pretty large rally in the overnight session, and then um, was able to hold up during RTH, and we just kind of did like this slow grind up all the way up to 29,360. And then Globex opened up last night and sold off again. So we kind of continue on a higher time frame. Last week we were able to make some new lows and get out of this balance area that we've been in for a couple of weeks. But ultimately, as we've opened up this week, the buyers were able to put in a higher low versus last week's low, and we rallied off of that yesterday. And now we're just kind of sitting in the middle of this week's balance. That's these horizontal white lines, and we're almost right in the middle of the like 50% for balance here. The point of control is technically up here around 29,316. But I think it's also pretty close to where we are right now. I don't think there's anything. Might be a few ticks more up here near the high. So what I'm looking for today is I'll wait for the 30-minute opening range to get set before really taking any trades. I think that the buyers are going to come out and attempt to potentially get up into this higher volume node from last night that they built before selling off. But everything right now is a little bit gross, kind of inside of today's value, inside of the week's value. Um, where they got rejected from starting in the Globex session last night and at the end of the RTH session yesterday was barely poking their head into last week's balance, this little white line right here. And then it wasn't really like I don't know that I would call it a very dramatic sell-off. It was just kind of a slow bleed. We got a little bit of acceleration when it did this morning, but since then, buyers have been busy pushing it back up. We're sitting at about just above the midpoint for this session. The previous day's low is all the way down at 28,701. That would be an area I would look at if we start to get any type of aggressive selling pressure. But we can see from the overnight that when they pushed this new low early this morning, that they really didn't get a lot of interest. You have a pretty distinct taper going on at the bottom of the volume profile, as well as what looks like a large delta print down here towards the low. So there was some probably a buyer that was sitting there waiting for that move. We've got a few different imbalances from the overnight session. That's these fainter dashed white lines coming from the ScalperIQ impact study. We're testing the bottom of one right now. So we'll see how buyers and sellers react here to see if they can get back above this imbalance. This is right where it rejected early this morning. And we have some imbalances down towards the lower end of the range as well. Um, there's a bunch of bigger events. It's kind of a light news week. There's more events coming next week. We have rate decision as well as some bigger earnings. So kind of my overall picture zoomed out is I don't know that the market really wants to make a distinct move this week. I don't know that we're going to get I don't know that the environment is right unless there's some kind of news event that we're going to get, lots of continuation down or some type of reversal back up. But it doesn't seem out of the question to me to gravitate back towards the middle of this overall balance. You can see that each of the last, basically since July, that we have moved the point of control for the NASDAQ down each week. So here, 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 and here. But really, there's a concentration of balance around 29, 600-ish is kind of the center of that whole overall overlapping value area. So if we slowly start to kind of drift or creep back up into that area, I think this area becomes a magnet. I just don't know that the market feels like making strong directional moves, just kind of looking from a bigger picture. But that's kind of all I see for right now. Might be a day of looking for some quick scalps. Yesterday's session was really not very volatile. Volatility was quite down. I didn't actually look at what the VIX was, but just judging by the few times that I looked over at the depth of market trading, it was trading much more gently. And I think the opening range for the NASDAQ yesterday was maybe less than 200 points, which is pretty small given our recent ranges. So I'm interested to see whether we get anything else um, that's different for today. But as of right now, our opening range is about 70 points on the NASDAQ, which would be more like what we traded yesterday. And in my opinion, makes it difficult to scalp when we don't want to move around very much. I'm somebody that, if you haven't watched the stream before, that I like to hold trades for pretty short periods of time. So when the volatility starts to get suppressed as we go into like a bigger news week next week, I don't particularly love trading when the market doesn't want to move around very much because it forces me to hold trades for a lot longer than I'm comfortable. Uh, so that's where we're at. Depth of market moving around at a reasonable pace, but on some kind of a pullback, would probably look into some of these imbalances here. And then there's one right in front of 29K if I was going to scalp some kind of long. Not a lot of strength from either side right now. Buyers had it for a minute and they're starting to give that control back to the sellers. You can see the candle coloring fading here. There's kind of dancing around the session mid. And to me, like, even though the sellers kind of, they had the direction overnight, we had one bounce, they were able to fade and make new lows. It wasn't super, like, it wasn't this sort of like long dramatic sell-off. It was just kind of a drift lower. Had a bounce, kind of got through it by, you know, not even 100 points, 75 points. Kind of got back to the midpoint of a little bit lower than the midpoint from yesterday and now back up here. So could have just been some overnight profit taking. It didn't look like aggressive selling in the overnight. I wasn't around for this particular move, and I'm sure it was a bit more violent, taking out the already bounced previous low. But just kind of saying it out loud that when I was watching the depth of market pretty late last night that I didn't really see a ton of what I would call aggressive sellers. Um, didn't have a lot of velocity to it. So let's see if anybody shows up. We're also kind of in peak middle of summer trading as well. Um, I know it's something that I don't necessarily think about all the time, and I get reminded by friends who sometimes trade less frequently than me and then come back and are like, "Oh, the summer, it's so slow." And I'm like, "Is it?" Um, and it can be. We've had so much news and political stuff going on that, I think the market has moved around maybe more than it does during typical summer trading times. But there was like, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there was some just atrocious summer trading. We had, I wasn't actually trading the NASDAQ at the time, but we were getting, 20 to not even 30 point ranges um, on ES and sometimes even smaller. And it was just such a slog to even just watch it. Um, so I'm hoping that the NASDAQ doesn't do that today, but we're about not quite 15 minutes from open and kind of pinned here to 29,150. Getting a little bit of a push here. Going to test the edge of value for this session right here at 29,175. It's getting above this imbalance level from the overnight. That bubble that just appeared is showing that that high was a little bit on the weak side from the buyers in terms of how they pushed. Got a little bit of negative delta at the top of that candle. But tight range so far. This imbalance that's up here, very close to the previous day's close, is sitting at 29,275. It's about 100 points from here. If they start getting momentum to the upside, that would be a target that I would keep in mind. Also, in my mind, if volatility is low and didn't see a lot of velocity from the sellers overnight, if we start to do this like slow drift, I think that very much favors the buyers for a grind up. Um, it's kind of it's a more boring trade that I don't particularly like and may not take. But if it's this slow environment, a little bit like what we had yesterday, that I think that very much favors the buy side. I think that sellers need a bit of uh, a bit of violence and a bit of initiation to really get things moving. So if we don't have the volume for it, if we're not seeing a lot of range here to open, to me, then we get into this, the market just wants to grind up. It thinks that our participants feel that value going into um, more of a risk environment next week with earnings and rate decision that we should sit higher than this. And if somebody made me put a finger on the chart about where that is, it's probably somewhere in the midst of all of this overlapping value, which we are still out of right now. We sort of tested the bottom end of it at yesterday's high, and that's where we sold off from. So if there's going to be this drift, it's going to be, in my opinion, through the overnight high and into some type of, center-ish area, maybe around, there's this point of control here at 29,633 from last week. And then from the week before, it's like almost 30,000. So to me, somewhere in between those by the end of this week, if we don't have any geopolitical news or anything else that sends it lower, if we're just going to grind, that looks like a grind target for buying, in my opinion. But we all know that, a single tweet or other headline could invalidate that in a hurry. Just kind of talking about what I'm seeing so far, where, we are just at a 200-point opening range here. So not even, can't do math. I like it like 120-point opening range. So still real slow. Market default mode to me is if no selling present, then we always have kind of an underlying bid underneath everything. So if the sellers aren't willing to push, it's really only, well, technically two directions to go. One is sideways, which we hate, but otherwise it's up. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the number of overnight levels that I see on the chart just down to 2. So there's this one that survived and this one up here. And then for RTH, I have it set to 4, but we've only had one imbalance so far, or at least one that's big enough for the impact study to flag. Just decluttering the chart a little bit. So if you're using the impact study and you reduce the number of levels you see on your chart, then the ones that show up are the strongest. So if I go to just one, we would say this is the largest imbalance from the overnight session. And then this would be the second largest that we're testing right now. So that's how that ranking system works. I'm just testing this little pivot from the overnight. Right now, I'm not super excited at the size of this opening range for the NASDAQ. It just makes me think it's going to be slow and choppy and tight range. And typically, if that's the case, it's kind of the opposite of if volatility is high, right? So like if volatility is high and ranges are high, then, you want wider stops. And if you happen to trade more than one contract, then reducing size makes sense. Like, your chance of getting a 50-point winner instead of a 25-point winner in a high range environment um, makes sense. So if you are typically looking for 25 points, then cutting your contracts from 2 to 1 and getting 50 points, you're still making the same amount of money and controlling your risk. So in this tighter environment, um, it might be prudent to tighten up your stops um, and increase number of contracts if that's something that you're comfortable doing. Um, we have seen volatility kind of turn on a dime, so I find that to be tricky when sizing up. Is that just because the volatility for one session starts one way doesn't mean that it's going to stay there, but just some thoughts as we're watching this trade inside of 130 40 point range. Nice hold off of that imbalance area. Pretty clean. Would love to see them push a new high here. Just get a little more volume and interest going into this. But I very much feel like streaming is like, I don't know, like camping. Like, can't predict the weather. I have no idea what session it's going to be. I come in obviously with some ideas and looking at higher time frame, but I come in as blind as as the rest of everybody else does. Um, these aren't fun and exciting sessions to trade if the range is going to be pretty small, but we're here. I personally think a lot of this slowdown the last few days uh, is being driven by next week's events more than anything happening presently. People are getting into position for potential rate decisions. Um, I have some friends that watch that a bit more closely than I do. I don't know where that sits right now in terms of which way they're leaning for rate decision. And even if I did, I don't know that that would inform anything that I'm going to do on an intraday basis. I just know that like suppressed volatility going into a big event week is not unheard of. Um, I actually think that that probably has some like underlying bullish tendencies, um, as people don't want to be sitting in risk on positions going into a big unknown set of events. So if you happen to be in a larger short position, especially from last week of making new lows for the last couple weeks on the Nasdaq, um, that if you happen to be in a short position and then we're going into a week that is a bit uncertain, I think it makes sense to, you know, maybe take some risk off the table, which would result in net buying here. So I'm going to scroll my DOM up to this level here, the 29275. Opening range is set for the 30-minute opening range. We're set in about 5 minutes ish. Um, this might be a level worth seeing if it's scalpable for a pullback there. Buyers have the momentum and pretty flat profile until they get to this tiny little shelf at like 262. Right now, just eating away at the whole overnight sell move that wasn't that convincing for starters. I think buyers have just stepped in and just started buying up whatever overnight sellers had. But it's like even here, you're basically like consolidation, push, pretty gentle pullback, and push again. So very productive for the buyers to start with. Let's see where everything is at this morning from a futures perspective as well. So the NASDAQ is down about 1/4% from where it sits right now from yesterday's close. ES is at break even. The Dow is up not quite 0.5%. Bitcoin is break even down. Actually, sorry, Bitcoin is down about 1%. If we're looking at equities, kind of a mixed bag. Chip stocks are up about 1.5%, at least if looking at AMD. Just kind of boring across the board. I don't see anything dramatically up or dramatically down. If you look at the S&P's top holdings, Meta is down 1.5%. Microsoft is down 1.5%. Actually, all of like Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple are all red. Though Amazon and Apple less than 1% red. It looks like it's mostly communication stocks and energy. So Dow forward stocks that are staying green and providing a bid. It looks like they're just going to grind right up to this level here. A couple minutes until the 30-minute opening range is set. At this point, we're probably looking for some type of a pullback for a long. I mean, it hasn't really been anything but buying since we opened up here. So if it pulls back from here, then I think natural first place to look is around 29,200. We'd be looking for this imbalance level. So that's at 29,275. So about 75 points away from if we were to get in around here. Stop would probably be underneath this little ledge and this underneath this zone here. Could probably get away with risking 15 to 20 points. So you're looking at like 3-to-1 risk to reward. It looks like they're going to get this imbalance level from the overnight right as we set the opening range. Yep, and there's that imbalance right there. And we're setting the opening range. And that's the volatility that you see picking up there is the rollover from the end of A period into B period. I didn't think it would be quite that clean, but that's about as clean as it gets. It was above the first imbalance from the overnight, got above it, came back, held it, and then basically straight line to the next imbalance. This isn't something I'm super interested in fading here, just in the manner that it got up to this level. We just kind of made a beeline for it. Uh, just haven't seen any aggressive selling anywhere since we opened. So sellers got to prove they exist before I decide to join their team. But at this point, they've pretty much V-shaped recovered the entire overnight, almost the entire overnight move. So whether this gives me a place to look at to get to potentially get long remains in question. Sort of my only point of reference on a pullback right now is still like 60 points away. I remember when I first started trading the opening range, and I really didn't know much, and so I was just kind of blindly taking the whichever way the opening range high or the opening range low broke. Even at the beginning, I like wasn't even taking confirmation, like waiting for a confirmation candle or anything. Just if price got above that level, I was buying it or shorting it, whichever was happening. And um, I can't tell you how frustrated I was because I think for the first like, I don't know, week and a half, it worked like magic. As like, of course, whenever you're trying a new trading strategy, I feel like it's some odd phenomenon. Um, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I have found the keys to the market. And I'm sure that whenever I started, we were in some type of some type of a trending up move. So of course, opening range high breakouts were working really well. Uh, there's an imbalance level there. Ooh, a couple imbalance levels. It's a little more interesting there. Anyway, so the opening range did not prove to be um, a strategy that I could follow so mechanically. There are stats out there. I haven't seen any for this particular year yet, but there are stats at the end of each year that people track to show, if you were taking, every single opening range, high or low breakout, how would you do over a given year? Um, but a lot of times, those strategies have fairly wide stops. In fact, the person that I learned from typically used the opening range mid as the stop. So if it was a high breakout, you would put your stop underneath the opening range mid. Or if you were short at the lows, it would be above the opening range mid. So depending on, for the NASDAQ or even ES nowadays with some of the volatility we've seen, that was just too much risk for my own flavor. And I just felt like I sat in a lot of price action. I didn't like holding for that long. So now I just use the opening range, high and low, as kind of points of reference, not as a strategy for if we break it, I buy it. So a couple imbalances here. Um, one basically right where we're at here at like 255, and the other one at like 250. I'm just going to hold those imbalances and try to make a new high here for RTH. There's enough volume up here that it's kind of a secondary point of control at like 29,250. So if they keep trading around this area, we'll probably end up with, it's basically going to be kind of a sloppy double distribution. So we'll have like one high volume node here, low volume node here, and then back to our secondary. So I would call it kind of a double distribution. It's a little sloppy because the amount of range on this one um, is a little bit like, it's not so distinct in terms of the curve or like the fall off of volume. We have like a little more interest down below. So it's kind of a gross profile, to be honest. Gonna test this imbalance level again. See if they can get back above it. Yeah, and you see they move the point of control now up to the 250 area. It doesn't really, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily really matter that like this exact level is the point of control, because since it just moved, it's probably only a few contracts more than whatever traded at 150, but it does change kind of the overall value picture if you're using, I think people consider wherever 70% of the volume is being done as the value area. I think that's the typical calculation. So I want to pull back, interested around 29,200 if we pull back that far. If we don't pull back, but they can get this back above 250 and hold, I might try to take a long there and look for, first target would be getting through the previous day's close and the Globex open. Would probably ultimately be looking for the previous day's high. But just not seeing a lot of oomph from either side. All right, I'm gonna scroll my DOM down to 29,200. They're kind of like right in between two potential execution areas. But I like to have my DOM scrolled to where I'm going to execute. I don't want to look at what's going on at a price that I don't care to trade at. Also, if I'm ever interested in saying that I'm interested in buying a particular price, it's going to be very rare for me to just put a limit order there. Um, I want to see what price does when it gets to a particular level. You know, are we able to hold above it? Do we get below it? how fast are we trading when we get there? And if it's just going to be this like sort of quick spike, maybe we like spike down below 200 and go right back up. Like I just won't be involved there. I find it personally demoralizing to put limit orders out there at certain levels that I think are going to hold and get swept, stopped out, and then have it go right back up. So I just don't get in the like if we make lows like this low here, like I probably won't get in because there's not like a retest. It's just sort of like spike down and then rally. Um, so we're now back above that 250 level. See if they can hold it above here. There we go. We'll see if they'll give me an entry here around 250. All right, I'm long at 51.75. Pretty low volatility. Gonna give it 15 points. First target is 29,300. If we get there, then I'll move my stop to break even or slightly into profit. This is mostly based on that the sellers just don't seem to have much oomph at the moment. So I think this grind up might continue. Nope. Gonna get my stop the first time I try that. Let it get back above that level again if it wants to try it. We need to see it get back above 250 and hold again if we're going to try that trade again. That was a pretty small stop. It was like 15 points. But it's like by using a 15-point stop there, we're looking for 300 as our first, so like 50 points away from our entry. So it's like 3-1, so you can kind of take multiple stops. All right, now we're down to this 200 level, which risk to reward here I think is even better if they can hold it here. some bigger buyers down here too. There's a 27 contract right here at 205. They won't fill. They just filled there. And there's more at 200. All right, there was definitely some buying here at 200. And they just spiked it, which is exactly what I just said was if they spike it, I probably won't get in. But if they show me a retest here and hold, all right, long at 203. Stop is 92, even tighter stop. If we get back up to 50, stop will go to break even. Looking at this previous top here from earlier in the RTH session and this zone, and I think my stop is semi-covering it right now, but there's a little bit of a low volume node right here. Tight enough stop that I'm willing to try this a couple times here at this 29,200 level, I think. There's enough upside here, potential upside here to make it worth it. So I'm okay taking multiple stops on the same idea if that hasn't become very apparent. Just about 20 points off of our position there. Little buy imbalance there on the way back up. And volatility picking up just a little bit here. Back up to 30s. Trying to get a candle color to roll over to buy color here. That's productive for the buyers. All right, that's up 50 points. We're gonna stop to break even here. I'm actually gonna tuck my stop just like at this point we're only risking four points, which is basically break even to me, but then I can be underneath this zone and just slightly under the bigger whole number. First target is the same, still looking at at 300. If it goes to 300, then I'll probably move my stop to under 250, lock in like 30 or 40 points. Nasdaq's going to look for new highs here, potentially. It's about 10 points off the high. Have a little bit of traffic in terms of MGI levels above. We have the close, we have the edge of value, and we have the Globex open, all sitting within about 25 to 30 points of each other. Something to be aware of if we break this high. So still some sellers willing to defend that high for now. That's not so productive from the buyers though. See if they hold this imbalance level in the middle. Otherwise, it's just going to come back and stop me out. If I get stopped, I'll probably look to try to get back in. There's a pretty aggressive move by the sellers there, just back to this exact same area. There's definitely more volatility than expected from me in this kind of grind up environment, but we just basically sold off that entire bounce move. All right, and I'm stopped there. I might get right back in if they don't flush it. Yeah, I'm afraid that just came and got my stop and is gonna go. Let me see if it comes back. We're about 60 points in the money there, but obviously had some upside targets. But that's pretty gross. You know, and maybe there were some places that I could have locked profit in, but you know, trying not to get wicked out, trying to hold for a larger move there. Still only down like 20 points, so TBD whether this continues to go. I think it pretty much got my stop to like the almost to my stop exactly. So this has like been a very good area, this 200 to hold. Um, they almost held it to the tick of the last down move though. Let's see where we're trading on a higher time frame. Kind of in no man's land, right at the edge of the bottom edge of last week's value. I'd prefer to see them flush this level a little bit since they keep trying to hold it so cleanly, and then try to buy it if we bid back above it. There's another buyer showing up there. I'm just struggling to get back above this imbalance level here at 220. But I'm not interested in shorting that there down into what is kind of developing into a pretty distinct support level. Still waiting for some kind of a flush here. Still having a hard time getting above 220. They got back above the 220 level. For a moment. Choppy price action. We didn't quite do B period inside of A period. They barely popped above the opening range high, basically like as they were setting it. But not a real clean break from either side. Now they're just kind of rotating around this 220 area. Pretty annoyed that that took my stop, but such is trading the Nasdaq. And seeing if I want to see what it trades like if it gets to 220 again, but looks like it might just push it. Yeah, that's a very Nasdaq move. Come and get your stop by a couple of points, and off we go. But it's going to be incredibly rare for you to see me get 50 or 60 points in the money and not move a stop to almost break even. Um, I'm considering trying to hitch a ride here at 250 if they can hold above this level, but you know, the risk to reward was much nicer at 200. Um, but it would be, if they get it up near the high, it would be the third test of the high. Um, can't hold above 250 yet. Pretty small rotations. We're doing like 40 to 50 point rotations right now, which are hard. Let's see if they're going to come back down to this. I see this imbalance in between here at like 220, but starting to get just a lot of traffic in here. I prefer a cleaner flush of 200 and then a rebid than I do getting involved in the middle of all of this. Some really gross price action so far. This low on this deepest pullback here is like 96, 29,196. So I want to see a flush of at least 96, which would be off the bottom of my DOM here. and then get back above 200 to potentially try to get long, depending on what it does if it gets below 200. Otherwise, if it holds a bid here and goes up and takes out the high, it's probably going to do it without me. Like there's a world in which I could try to get long as we get above these imbalances here, but it's kind of right in the middle of where these rotations have been taking place and right at the point of control. We're looking for like 29,300, so it's only like another 50 points from there. I was okay with trying that when we hadn't pulled back as far as we had so far. Um, but starting to knock on this 210 level a bunch of times here. Oh, this is painful price action. Just compressing. Just each pullback and each push has gotten smaller here. So if we pull back and we don't hold 200, there's kind of a double imbalance level here around 29,162. It's like this top from the overnight and right around the RTH open. See if they get a proper flush of this level. I talked to, I think last Friday that there was a stream that I was watching, just kind of like looking to see what it is that other people are doing as we're starting to build out some of these live streams. And I found one where the guy was playing video games, playing golf mini games in the middle of streaming. Uh, price action isn't quite that bad yet, but it's not that far off either. But to me, this price action is very indicative of we have more informative events happening next week with FOMC and earnings. So there's less participation overall. People don't want to put risk on, so you lose your kind of aggressive selling and you end up with just kind of the natural passive bid the market has when there's not enough sort of negative headlines or risk on environment to push things down. They're really working this level. Back onto my DOM again. Let's see if they flush lower. There's a big sell there at 29,200. Yeah, there's the flush of that level. Now let's see what they want to do. Lower area of interest is 29,160, where there's a double imbalance. But let's see if this is just a quick flush of these buyers at 29,200. Nope. Gonna actually get some momentum down. All right, they got it far enough below 200 that I'm gonna need to see them rebid it, probably back up to like 215 or so, and then come back down to 200 to see if it holds. All right, there's back above 200. Do we get any type of meaningful buying happening? Still want to see them push this a little bit higher. Otherwise, we'll go look at the 160 level, this double imbalance down here. So first attempt to get back over 200 did not work. Still seller sitting in front of 200 right now. Probably have to use a slightly wider stop here. And volatility has picked up a little bit. My stop, if I get long, will probably be around 180-ish. But still some aggressive selling right there underneath 200. All right, I'm gonna go take a peek at these 60 levels. So a little pocket around 160. Let's see. Might have to ping pong between because I have two kind of places that I'm interested in potentially getting long. Right now it's closer to this one, so that's back above 200 briefly. See, can they hold it on a back test? Nope. All right, that's back above 200. Let's see if they come down and let me get an entry here. Nope. Not for the moment. Violence meter is picked up just a touch from where we were. So looking for them to come back down around 200 and see if they hold. So they got it back above this level that was holding, but let's see if anybody's willing to step in front of it if it pulls back down. Once again, like our range is so tight right now. Like I don't feel comfortable chasing this. Like I want a good entry because otherwise the risk to reward is not so good up near the highs in my opinion. We've also stayed in range for a really long time now, so I think the chances of a strong directional move start to diminish. Might just end up being a small red session for me, which when it's chopping like this, I'll always take a small red session. So buyers showing up here, getting it back above this imbalance level at 220. There wasn't really a good retest of 200 there. They got it to like 206, but I'm going to be pretty stubborn here with the entry that I want to take. So we got half the battle. We got the flush of 200 held underneath it and back above it. I need it to come back and hold for us to get an entry. Target would be the same as before, up near 300. See what 200 has in the tank here if they're going to touch it. Still stuck beneath this imbalance level, which is also the point of control right now. It's like right at 220. Just having a hard time staying over 220. Let's look on a higher time frame right now. Just in the middle of nowhere, basically. It keeps trying to hold the bottom of last week's value, but kind of a lot of traffic here, both intraday and higher time frame. I mean, that's just, look at that price action. It's just bouncing between, it's like bouncing like 12 points. And that's a touch through 200. We're going to try it one more time. Probably going to get stopped right there. Held it for a second. Stop is 82. We're long right at 200. It held it long enough for me to get long. At some point, you kind of have to just click the DOM. But wasn't my best entry there. Target remains the same, looking for us to drift back up to the highs. If we get above 245 or so, back above into these imbalances, I'll probably move my stop again. Slightly wider stop than last time because the volatility has just picked up. And this is this imbalance level at 220, which is going to be our first kind of thorn in our side for our long. Back below 200 again is not productive for the buy crowd. Could have shorted off this imbalance level quite a few times by now if you're willing to scalp 15 or 20 points, which I am not, but more power to you if you are able to do that. The level is very much holding buyers to the downside. This is very gross and choppy price action. Back to this same level. They've got to get it back above 220. And they think they need to do it soon or we're going to get stopped out again. I don't know what buyer caused this imbalance earlier, but that is very much becoming an issue for our long position here. Right now they're just rotating around my position. And gonna stop me one more time. Came very close to stopping us out there and now back above 200 again. I mean, this is just a chop fest. Got to get through this level. Where are my buyers? Still somebody sitting at 220 on the NASDAQ. If they can put some of these 220 sellers underwater, we might get a little pop. That's better. There we go. Once again, if we get above like 245, stop is going to go to break even. Again, that was a bit aggressive in terms of how fast they flipped that delta over. That's why you're getting that marker there right at 220. All right, I'm at least going to tighten stop up. Get a little bit of a wider stop. My stop is at 95. So risking 5 points. So we'll be down, if they come and stop us, we'll be down like 25 points for the session. Really just kind of, I consider that almost break even-ish. So just protecting against what I think is really, really bad price action. I'm looking on a higher time frame, you know, putting in what I would call a productive looking hourly candle, kind of almost an inside candle for the 8 o'clock candle. And zooming out just a little bit. Trying to get back up into some of these imbalances here above 50. And that's the first imbalance there, right at like 247, 248-ish. They're above that one. Let's see if they test the 51. Our target remains the same. We're looking for somewhere above the high, close to 300. Looking for just like a pop through the opening range high and then see what momentum looks like from there. So this kind of third try to break this high. I'm going to put an offer out just short of 95 if they happen to get a stop run through the high if they get there. Little weakness on that push, which I don't love. Doesn't mean I'm just going to automatically get out of position, but buyer's running out of steam just a little bit there. You're seeing a pullback into these imbalance levels now. All right, to continue to be prudent, since they already stopped us doing this one time last time, stop is going to go to 210. We would want to see them hold this imbalance and this breakout level from 220 on a pullback. If they get below that, we're just like back into a chop zone and getting away from the time that I want to be trading. So I gotta see buyers hold somewhere. Right now, trying to hold some of these imbalance levels, but you see me shaking my head just at the buyers not holding anything on a pullback at the moment. So we've choke stop into profit. We'll be down like 10 points for the session if they get me. Still giving it a chance to hold the 220 level if it comes back, but not a lot of room past that. All right, looks like they might come test the high here. Opening range high is 277.25. I'm just kind of looking in to see like what it's running into this sort of like pivot low from last week. Not really, just kind of in no man's land still. So I have this offer out here. I'm happy if they push it in one go and get a like stop run through the high. If they just kind of start to grind up and keep holding above the opening range high, then I might let it trade for longer. But I always kind of put offers out here because if we get this quick like 20 to 30 point pop, then I'm happy to get filled and I have an order ready. Kind of hesitating in front of the high here, which don't love. That's through the high there. Getting some good momentum. Might get my order all in one go. Strong push from the buyers there. Our offer is at 95.25. My stop is going to come up to below these imbalance levels now. All right, and we're filled on the upside. So canceling stop. We might get continuation here, but we've chopped so much inside the range that I wouldn't be surprised to see this mean revert a little bit. So what was a really choppy session, actually ending up green there, just short of 29,300. So got stopped out a couple times for small, and honestly got real close to getting stopped out again. I think my stop was like 180, 181 maybe. Missed it by a couple points. But we're flat. I think that's going to be it for this session. I still kind of stand by my earlier thesis that I think we continue to chop and or lightly grind up into the right as we go into next week. We'll be back streaming again on Friday morning, see if there's any volatility to be had as we have the sort of last day of this week and into the more event-filled next week with FOMC and earnings. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be back on Friday.